Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have good, bad, and crazy for you today. A lot of immigration talk today, including the firestorm over a Wisconsin judge and how blue states are working overtime to help protect illegal immigrants, including criminal illegal immigrants, which is really should be in the crazy category. But for that, we're going to leave it to an aspiring 2028 presidential candidate who, by all accounts, really should have no chance. Well, we also hope you enjoyed our Friday special edition of President Trump's first 100 days in office, the good, the bad, the crazy. If you haven't had a chance to hear that yet, we encourage you to do that. One of the reasons we did a special edition is because I was out of town on Friday. I had the honor of traveling to Michigan, where the son of one of my very good college friends had the chance to be drafted into the NFL. He was drafted into the NFL and for his very favorite team. So Detroit Lions fans, I know you're going to be very happy with that wide receiver you drafted in the third round named Isaac Tesla. He is an incredible player, but he's an even better person. So it'll be great for your locker room and your community. Also looking at the Chicago Bears, got a tight end in the first round, a Michigan man, Colston Loveland. I think will be a good fit in the offense. Not the tight end most people expected. And then for many of the other picks, they went in the trenches, which I still think is where they need to beef up. And so overall, a very good draft weekend, but just an incredible experience watching someone's hard work year after year after year after year pay off in this special way.
Oh, I'm envious, Greg. That seems like just a wonderful experience. God bless that kid. And I salute the Bears for having the courage of their convictions to go with the tight end not named Tyler Warren. That Penn State guy, all those guys. We don't need that guy. I think that, as for my end, love what the Jets did with their first three picks. And then apparently they just went home. They basically were like, what name you got? And we drafted for the special team starting in the fourth round. Great going, guys. No, it's right. Hey, three good picks would be manna from heaven for this crew. But hey, speaking of Jets, I know the news about planes, Greg?
Yes, of course. So I flew to Michigan. On the plane, they've got the recorded announcements now. They don't, I guess, trust the people to do them live. But nonetheless, they explain the seatbelt and everything else. And then they get to the oxygen masks, which have been part of the announcements forever. But then they say if you're wearing a face mask, you need to remove the face mask before putting on the oxygen mask. And Jim, not that long ago in our society, I feel like that would be common sense. But the reason they have this announcement must be because somebody didn't think to remove the face mask before putting on the oxygen mask. And sometimes you think things are idiot-proof, but they're just not.
First of all, Greg, I imagine that's some sort of aviation version of Darwinism. That if you don't, and you're gasping for air, wait, I should take this mask off. Then let's also point out that when you go out there for a party for the NFL draft, that is not the context you expected to hear the word face mask.
Not at all. So yeah, it reminds me of the McDonald's coffee is hot, be careful. And somebody got, what was it, $80-some million because they spilled hot coffee on their lap and it actually, was hot. Shocking. But anyway, let's talk about a great new sponsor, and that is Fatty 15. And look, if you're getting older, and I can certainly relate to that, you start noticing certain signs like maybe poor sleep, low energy, stiffer joints, more serious health concerns than that. Aging is personal, and we all feel it in different ways. So C15 from Fatty 15. It's the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years. It's an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness, and you guessed it, aging and longevity.
Fatty 15 co-founder Dr. Stephanie Venn Watson discovered the benefits of C15 while working with the U.S. Navy to enhance the health of aging dolphins. But now backed by more than 100 studies, C15 is now known to strengthen cells and slow biological aging at the cellular level. Without enough C15, cells become fragile and age faster, which accelerates your overall aging. This led to the discovery of the first new nutrient deficiency in 75 years, cellular fragility syndrome, which may affect up to 1 in 3 people worldwide.
Yeah, I certainly didn't know about it. Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier and longer. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout. That's fatty15.com/3ml, code 3ml. All right, Jim. Well, while I was gone, I had to catch up yesterday on this crazy story out of Wisconsin, and you've written about this in great detail, riveting detail. In fact, I was late for taping because I got caught up in Jim's excellent description of the case out of Milwaukee. We're talking about Judge Hannah Dugan, 65-year-old judge in the Milwaukee area. She was arrested for actively thwarting ICE attempts to bring a criminal illegal alien into custody. This is a guy who had been caught years before, deported. Now he's back. He was actually in front of Judge Dugan on domestic battery charges, so he's not a good dude. But the judge was very upset to find out that ICE personnel were in the lobby of the courthouse ready to make an arrest, which they often do because it's near the metal detectors and they figure they won't get into too big of a scuffle. And ultimately, she was very upset about this. She goes back into the courtroom, has the defendant sit in the jury box, and then just has him and his attorneys leave through the jury door so they evade capture, not for long, but evade capture from ICE officials. The Democrats are freaking out about this, Jim, saying Trump's arresting judges for going against his policies. This has nothing to do with the decision that she made about a Trump policy. It's about actively thwarting a federal attempt, which is perfectly legal.
Yeah, so I was spurred to write this, Joel, by seeing the furious response from a whole bunch of Democratic lawmakers, Tina Smith of Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar, among others. And I was like, all right, so what actually happened here? And I always like to go directly to the legal documents. Now, I should point out, now, Greg, the only legal document we have for this is the Affidavit of Criminal Complaint. It's put together by an FBI special agent and describes the sequence of events. Now, you probably have heard the old saying, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. You know, the indictment is just an accusation. It still has to have to trial unless the judge decides to plead guilty or something like that. But you look at the facts laid out in this affidavit. It really is hard to come up with some sort of alternate explanation or for how this judge could have done anything other than obstruction of justice and concealing an individual to prevent his discovery of arrest. By the way, both of which are fairly serious and get you a couple of years in prison. These are not slap on the wrist sorts of things for a judge to do. You walked through it. I went through the entire, just page by page, detail by detail. It is not unusual for ICE agents or other agents to arrest someone in a courthouse, not in the courtroom. And they had already met with a Milwaukee County Sheriff and said, look, we don't want to do this in the courtroom, during the court case, anything like that. But when he leaves, we will arrest him and we will begin the deportation process. Let's point out that this guy, Flores Ruiz, already had a notice of expedited removal by U.S. Border Patrol agents way back in 2013. So this is not Trump going out and the Trump administration going out and doing something sinister. This is an order of expedited removal that goes back to the Obama years. And once you have that, you cannot be permitted into the country. That you don't get a legal review. You don't get in front of an immigration judge. That is something that says this person is inadmissible to the United States. Therefore, they must go immediately. So they show this to the judge in question. She insists that because it's the wrong type, they have to go to the chief judge. Go to the chief judge of the entire building. And he says, just don't do it in a courtroom. You can do it in a public hallway. The public hallways are public places. That's what the plan is. As you mentioned, she's sneaking him out the back door, full knowing that he has an arrest warrant for him. He's also supposed to be there on the domestic battery charges. She never tries him for that. So effectively, she is helping him leave, even though he's supposed to be in front of her that day on these domestic battery charges, reportedly hit somebody 40 times. So they don't name every witness in this case. But one of them clearly is the prosecutor, who's like, I thought I was going to lead a case against this guy. And then they say the case has been postponed. Well, what happened? The judge, there's no clear explanation about this from the judge. It certainly seems like this judge decided she does not like ICE enforcement. And she immediately, first of all, she ordered the agents to leave the courthouse. I don't think she necessarily has that authority to do so, but she just was decided. And then she's like, well, then you got to go to see the chief judge. And she just decided that she was not going to allow this arrest to happen. And that she doesn't have that authority, that she doesn't have any ability to say, I've decided your warrant for the person's arrest or removal is invalid. So I think she kind of, I don't know if I call it Trump derangement syndrome or whatever, she took leave of her senses. She did not exercise good judgment. This clearly was aiding and abetting somebody from escaping. Thankfully, they caught the guy on the street like a block away. But all in all, this was, like this, if everything, unless there's, I can't imagine anything where she'll be able to say she didn't understand the warrant or something. She's a judge, right? There's no way she can, plead ignorance for this sort of thing. I also would just throw in there, because I've seen the talk about judges, and we should point out that the other semi-high profile arrest in this circumstance occurred in New Mexico. It is a former judge. This judge retired actually just in March, so it's a fairly recent departure from the bench. Jose Cano is the name of this judge, Doña Ana County in New Mexico. This was a charge of destroying evidence. They basically had a tenant who had apparently gang affiliations, Venezuelan citizen. Homeland Security investigates, arrests the guy, and they're trying to find cell phones of evidence of his gang affiliations and criminal activities, arrested him with a bunch of guns, things like that. Well, apparently, according to the indictment, during the questioning, former judge Jose Cano admitted to destroying Ortega's cell phone by smashing it with a hammer approximately 5 weeks prior, believing it contained incriminating photos and videos of Ortega with firearms. Forensic analysis of the recovered phones revealed messages linked to Ortega's criminal activities, including affiliations with Tren de Agua gang and images of Ortega with firearms, end quote. That's evidence tampering. Like he admitted it. This is not a question of, he said, this is a confession. Cano will have his day in court as a defendant, not as a judge, and we will see what happens. But both of these look like pretty open, straightforward, open and shut cases of judges that have basically decided, I'm not going to cooperate with this. In fact, I'm going to help the fugitive hide, which is not your role as a judge and is a crime. It is perfectly legitimate to arrest a judge when the judge has committed a crime, which is what it appeared in this case. And then I went back and I found Reuters did this. I hate to say this. The typical judge is a very good person and obeys the law, but there are plenty of judges out there that don't, and they get arrested. So the idea that, this is a sign of fascism. Look, Democrats, if you want to make this argument, you're going to need much better examples than this.
Jim, it wasn't that long ago. It happened in the Obama years. It happened again in the Biden years where states were begging the feds to enforce immigration laws, and the Supreme Court said, no. The federal government has priority in enforcing immigration laws. But once it's a Republican administration who actually wants to enforce them, all of a sudden you got blue states or blue state figures, in the case of Wisconsin, saying, oh, no, federalism. We really got to look at this. And we'll look at this again in our second martini. But the whiplash on the role of states versus the federal government, depending on the circumstances, is quite something. Well, speaking of the federal government, especially if you want it out of your business, let's talk about Hillsdale College. One of the things that is great about being a Hillsdale grad is that you got a good grasp of the American founding and some of the solid principles that make America great, including capitalism. On other campuses, it's a dirty word. They'll tell you how capitalists are evil and greedy. But at Hillsdale College, they explain how capitalism is actually what's expanded wealth in the United States and around the world more than anything else over the recent centuries. And so right now, Hillsdale College is offering a free course, Understanding Capitalism.
In fact, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free online courses. You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories from the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. If you've ever listened to this podcast and said, I want to be more like Greg Corombos, this is a great first step.
Go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. So we foreshadowed. It's not just Wisconsin where things have gotten crazy, Jim. Colorado is in the process of making it much, much harder for ICE to do its job as well. The Colorado Senate has approved what is being called a sweeping immigration protections bill. Senate Bill 276 passed nearly along party lines, 22-13. One Democrat flipped over to join Republicans in voting against the measure. The bill makes several major changes to Colorado immigration law, touching on everything from personal data sharing to criminal proceedings for immigrant defendants. And this is courtesy of the Post-Independent out there in Colorado. Proponents say the bill is about ensuring immigrants' rights are respected as President Donald Trump rolls out a hardline immigration agenda, known as following the law. The bill builds on restrictions on personal information sharing between state agencies and federal immigration officials to include local governments as well as the state's judicial and legislative branches. It also prevents spaces like schools, hospitals, and child care centers from providing federal officers access to private spaces and information about enrolled children or patients. Violators would be fined $50,000 per offense, with the money then going to the state's Immigration Legal Defense Fund. So, Jim, as things build and build and build, from no bail for violent criminals who just get out and violate again, to judges actively helping people physically evade capture, to things like this making it more and more complicated for ICE, How do we not conclude the left is pro-criminal?
There's that. I'm just observing the opening sentence of this article, quote, "The bill makes several major changes to Colorado immigration law," unquote. Greg, why do states have their own separate immigration laws?
Right.
Right. Like I thought, we had this whole big Supreme Court decision back when Arizona wanted to have state troopers to start inquiring about people's immigration status. We were told you're not allowed to have your own state level enforcement of immigration laws. Only the federal government can do this. So now the federal government is doing this. And the state of Colorado is like, nope, we're not doing this. Nope, we're opting out. We're not, which was actually worse than opting out. They're actually working against this. It is just absolutely baffling. And the other thing I kind of look at this, again, this Monday is all about foreshadowing on today's episode of the Three Martini Lunch. It's a wide open race for Democrats in 2028. There's a lot of road between now and then. But if you're thinking about, if you want to run, you kind of have to get your last little policy victories in place here, this year and next year, because basically the competition is going to begin by 2027, right? That's when people really start announcing. And I've heard people mention Jared Polis, the governor of Colorado, as a potential one. I've heard some people make the argument he's not as anti-free market as certain Democrats. He's a little more libertarian minded. If you're looking for a Democrat who isn't a crazy left winger like AOC, this is this is the guy. I'd be very curious about how Polis is going to handle this, because I don't think you can sign this law and then claim to be an tough on the border, tough on illegal immigration at all. This is basically trying to do everything possible to prevent federal immigration. And this is not about changing our laws. If you want to change the laws, you can try to do that. You're not going to get anywhere with a Republican House and a Republican Senate, but at least that's where you're supposed to be making those kinds of changes. This is basically saying, well, there are laws on the books, but we're going to do everything we can to throw monkey wrenches in there, to throw sand in the gears, and do everything possible to prevent the enforcement. So yeah, the law's on the books, but much like it's been for people who argue last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, we're not really going to enforce them, or we're going to have very intermittent enforcement. And therefore, if you come across the border illegally, you'll be able to find work and you'll be able to live life normally, which I think is pretty clear. The 2024 election, if anything else, if American people wanted to make life easier for illegal immigrants, they would have voted for Kamala Harris. You can't say, oh, people didn't think Trump was going to be tough. This is Trump's signature issue. So the American people made their thing. Now, they didn't win Colorado, but I guess the big question is, does Colorado get to opt out of enforcement of federal enforcement of immigration laws? I don't think they have, and I assume the Trump administration will, if this becomes law, the Trump administration will be filing suit, like that. But it would still have to work its way up through the Supreme Court, and in the meantime, it would, basically everybody, every school, every courthouse, every government building would basically become a no-go zone for everybody in ICE. Unbelievable.
They won't even facilitate the expulsion of criminal illegal aliens. It's absolutely insane. And we talked about the mayor of Denver, who initially said he was going to resist. He's not in the state Senate, obviously. He was going to go
full insurrection. He was ready to deploy the Denver cops to,
Yeah, and then he got a lot of blowback for that. So he's like, no, we're fine with getting rid of the criminals. But then, here you go with the Democrats once again. They simply don't want these people to leave. Ever, regardless of what they've done. It's absolutely maddening. So I will reiterate, Jim, my request for the Supreme Court to set aside 1 day a week for all the legal challenges involving Trump administration policies, like the drive-through lane, like you talked about. I seriously think we need that, or else all this stuff's going to be in limbo forever. All right, well, don't stress out about the headlines too much. The spring is also a great time to make sure that the exterior and interior of your home are as alive and fresh as ever, and that's where Fast Growing Trees can help you out a lot. Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. That's because Fast Growing Trees offers a wide selection of plants. It also gives you easy online ordering, quick delivery, and expert support, including landscaping advice, and their Alive and Thrive guarantee, making sure that if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll make it right, no questions asked.
And you don't need to have a yard or a lot of space, and you can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home. And that's on top of the wide variety of houseplants that are available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants, so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs.
And check it out online. I mean, the variety is fantastic. As I've said so many times, there's the smaller plants, there's the big leafy plants. You could obviously do bushes and all sorts of other things outside. You can grow your own spices and lemons and avocados. There's lots of different things you can do, and it's so much fun once they arrive. This spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and then use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms apply. fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. All right, Jim. I hope nobody throws rotten fruit at us because we're talking about the potential 2028 presidential candidates here. Yes, we still have 2025 to go in Virginia, New Jersey, then all the midterms next year. But face it, people are already jockeying for position. And if you ever go to Iowa or New Hampshire and you don't represent Iowa and New Hampshire, you're going to get speculation written about you. And so Jim's got a forthcoming Washington Post column coming on the political aspirations of J.B. Pritzker, the billionaire heir, among his other family members, of the Hyatt Hotel fortune. He is the two-term governor of Illinois. I don't know exactly what his plans are in 26, or even if he's allowed to run in 26. But nonetheless, he was speaking up at a dinner in New Hampshire over the weekend. So obviously the speculation will follow. But Pritzker is now trying to become one of these take-it-to-the-streets Democrats, which I don't think fits him real well. Here's a couple of clips from his speech where he wants Democrats and others to get in the face of Republicans for all the horrible things they're doing.
Never before in my life have I called for mass protests, for mobilization, for disruption. But I am now. These Republicans cannot know a moment of peace. They have to understand that we will fight their cruelty with every megaphone and microphone that we have. We must castigate them on the soapbox and then punish them at the ballot box.
Sounds a lot like Maxine Waters from about 8 years ago, Jim. You get in their face, those cabinet officials. You see them at a gas station or a restaurant. You get in their face.
No way any crazy left-winger will do something stupid and crazy and violent, right?
No, they would never misinterpret
We haven't
that.
had any of that. Oh, by the way, for listeners who are wondering why Greg Corombos, fan of the Chicago Bears, did not know if there are term limits in Illinois, it is because at this point, almost every previous Illinois governor has been indicted. And thus they never really even have to face the issue of whether they can run for a third term. People might say, why is J.B. Pritzker getting any serious consideration? He looks an awful lot like Danny DeVito's portrayal of the Penguin running for mayor of Gotham City in Batman Returns. But you might populism. This is a great populist moment. We're going to run literally the richest guy in U.S. politics. I guess now that Bloomberg is more or less retired. I believe right now, at the latest numbers of Forbes, Pritzker's net worth is at $3.7 billion. That is more than LeBron James, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Jerry Seinfeld combined. You thought the Mike Bloomberg campaign spent a lot of money? If and when he runs, and it certainly sounds like he wants to run. First of all, he's going to get a lot of liberal talking head and former campaign consultants writing columns entitled, "Why J.B. Pritzker Must Be Our Next President." And in between every paragraph, it's going to say, "Hire me. I'm only going to charge you double my regular rate. And I'm going to get a certain portion of all the ads we run. And we're going to run more ads than ever before." By the way, I believe he has spent close to $300 million in both of his campaigns for governor. He was running up against folks who didn't have that much of a shot to begin with. It was a crowded Democratic field. It's Illinois. You win the Democratic primary, you've almost certainly won the general election. But this guy, he just blew everybody out of the water by spending this much. Not a self-made man. His uncle founded Hyatt Hotels. His father managed to develop the chain. Hey, Greg, you remember the name Penny Pritzker?
Yeah, Secretary of Commerce for Obama.
Thank you. Also a billionaire. A couple scandals on her watch, but we're not even going to worry about that. So, look, once you're wealthy enough, you can purchase your way out of the accountability for that. And apparently he's run into problems with Harvard and all that stuff. I'm sure as people look at the the thriving economy of Chicago, the clean government we've seen out of Illinois, please give us more of that. Please give us more of that at the national level. It certainly looks like we'd be looking like another Bloomberg trajectory, where somebody's got a ton of money And yeah, look, you're governor of Illinois. That's not nothing. And you run around and you say, I'm going to do for the country what I did to Illinois. And everybody's like, oh, dear God, no, please don't do that. But nonetheless, like, that'll be this. And he'll spend a ton of money and he'll get taken seriously because of that money. But in the end, this is not, I'm not even going to say the physique of a typical president. I'm just going to say just not the kind of outline, the kind of profile. How am I trying to put this? That in the end... Yeah. Yes. There you go. That they might need a larger bathtub at the White House. And like one of the weird things is it's so, and he's always been this guy who bought his way into office. And let's face it, once you're in office in Illinois, you're incumbent, you're likely to win. So it's not like he's got like these phenomenal gifts as a campaigner. It's not like he's wildly charming, not a whirling dervish of raw political charisma. I think my favorite little detail of a forthcoming column. Just observing that I remember back in the 2024 Democratic Convention, I was there in Chicago. He was getting a lot of credit for Chicago hosting it, and you could see billboards all around the city, and they were mentioned paid for by J.B. Pritzker and all that stuff. But, it's a Democratic convention, so they have to have Bernie Sanders speaking. And Bernie Sanders did his usual spiel about, my friends, at the very top of our to-do list is the need to get big money out of our political process. Billionaires in both parties should not be able to buy elections, including primary elections. The very next speaker, J.B. Pritzker, who begins by opening, unlike Donald Trump, I'm an actual billionaire. Whoever put together the speaker schedule at the DNC, my hat is off to you. Well done. I also would point out that Democratic delegates applauded both lines. Not the sharpest knives in the drawer. Did not sense any contradiction there whatsoever.
Oh, that is incredible. Now, help me with my checklist here, Jim. So, because he's a leftist, is J.B. Pritzker not an oligarch?
You and I would argue that oligarch also means like rule of the few, not just the rich. So the idea,
rich, yes.
But the point is that like this guy, because I remember John Corzine back in New Jersey. Every wealthy politician gets accused of buying their election, and sometimes it's fair, sometimes it's not. Money is a big advantage in politics, but also the example I keep citing of Mike can get it done, where even my kids were quoting it back to me because it was popping up in video games and on YouTube. Or Arianna Huffington's husband. Was it Mike Huffington? Am I remembering his name?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, you can spend a lot of money, but if you're not that likable, it's just not going to work. And Pritzker's in a case where he just spent so much. And of course, it's a Democrat, so there's a million candidates. And he outspent the rest of the field by like 200 to 1. He did buy his office, and the second time around, nobody was going to run any serious challenge. And Lord knows, it's not like the Illinois Republicans, after they held their convention in the phone booth, they made their nominee, and they didn't have enough votes to outdo him. So the question is, can you purchase the Democratic Party's presidential nomination? My suspicion is no, but we'll see how it shakes out. God knows what the political landscape will look like by the time 2027, 2028 rolls around.
Billionaires are bad if they support
Unless they're
Republicans.
ours, and then they're
Billionaires
good.
are great if they support Democrats. That's basically the logic on the Democratic side of the aisle, let's be honest. So, Jim, quite a start to the week. We'll see what's up tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Monday. Join us again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.